should have seen it coming. The way my father's voice turned sharp when he spoke to me. The way my mother's eyes darted away when I entered the room. The way my siblings whispered behind my back, their laughter fading the moment I got close. But somehow I still wasn't ready. Not for the moment when my father, the man who was supposed to protect me, looked me in the eye and said, "You never brought anything good to this family." The words landed like a fist to my gut. My breath hitched, and for a second I swore the ground beneath me tilted. I was standing in the middle of the living room, our family's living room, but I suddenly felt like an outsider, like I didn't belong. My mother stood beside my father, her arms crossed tightly over her chest, lips pressed into a thin, disapproving line. My younger brother sat on the couch, arms draped lazily over the backrest, watching the scene unfold like it was some cheap drama. My older sister Stephanie scrolled on her phone, barely interested. I swallowed hard. "Dad, what are you talking about?" His face twisted as if the question itself was offensive. "I mean exactly what I said, Alyssa." He sighed like I was exhausting him. "You've never contributed anything to this family. You're a burden, a waste of time." A waste of time. I had to remind myself to breathe. Is this because I don't have a high-paying job yet? My voice was calm, but inside, my heart pounded against my ribs. I had been working so damn hard. Long hours, side hustles, learning everything I could. I was building something they knew nothing about. But to them, it didn't matter. My mother finally spoke. "It's not just about the money, Alyssa. It's about you. You've always been difficult. Difficult." The word stung more than I expected. "Oh, you mean difficult as in not doing everything you say? Difficult as in trying to live my own life instead of being your personal servant?" My father's jaw clenched. "Watch your tone." I let out a sharp breath, my hands curling into fists at my sides. "I work hard. I'm responsible. I've never asked you for anything." "And yet, you still bring nothing of value," my father said. "Look at Stephanie. She has a stable career. Look at Michael. He's got his life figured out. But you're wasting your time chasing things that will never amount to anything." I glanced at my sister, who still hadn't looked up from her phone. She had a stable career, sure, but only because Dad pulled strings for her. And Michael? He had his life figured out because he never had to work for a single thing. Everything had been handed to him. But me? I had built everything on my own. And yet, in their eyes, I was nothing. My father shook his head. "We've given you every opportunity, and you've thrown them away. We're done wasting time on you." I stared at him, my breath coming in slow, measured beats. "So, what are you saying?" My father folded his arms. "We're saying we're done." My mother exhaled, like this was some weight off her shoulders. "You should leave, Alyssa." My heartbeat slowed. For a long second, the room blurred, the voices around me fading into a dull hum. They were serious. This wasn't just anger. This wasn't an empty threat. They were disowning me. For a moment, my mind flashed back to all the years I had tried to earn their approval. The late nights spent helping my mother when she was overwhelmed. The times I stayed up comforting my sister when her relationships fell apart. The money I had loaned my brother when he was reckless with his spending. None of it mattered. To them, I had never mattered. I straightened my shoulders. I wasn't going to beg. "All right?" My father raised an eyebrow. "All right?" "Yeah," I said, voice steady. "I'll leave." For the first time, my sister looked up from her phone. My brother blinked, like he hadn't expected me to actually go through with it. Even my mother hesitated, her fingers tightening slightly around her wrist. But I didn't give them time to take it back. I turned around, walked to the front door, and placed my hand on the knob. And then, I looked over my shoulder. For the first time in my life, I wasn't scared of them. "You'll regret this," my father scoffed. "Don't be dramatic." I almost laughed. They had no idea. They didn't know that the past few years I had been building something of my own. They didn't know about the business I owned in secret. They thought they were cutting me off. But in reality, I was cutting them off. I stepped outside, the cold air hitting my skin, and I walked away. For the first time in my life, I felt free. And 2 years later, they came begging. Walking away was the easy part. What came after? That was the real test. I left my parents' house that night with nothing but a single suitcase and the weight of their rejection pressing against my chest. No job lined up. No safety net. No idea what the hell I was going to do next. But I had one thing: determination. And of course, my secret business. It wasn't much. Just an online store I had been running in the background for the past 2 years. I had started it as a side hustle, pouring whatever spare time I had into it. At first, it had been slow, barely making me anything. But over time, I figured out how to market, how to sell, how to scale. And now, it was small, but it had potential. And I was about to bet everything on it. The first few months were brutal. I crashed on my best friend Rachel's couch for weeks while I figured things out. I picked up freelance gigs, worked late into the night, barely scraped by. Some nights I would lie awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering if my father was right. Maybe I really was a failure. Maybe I really would amount to nothing. But every time that doubt crept in, I reminded myself I wasn't going to prove him right. So I worked. Harder than I ever had before. I poured every waking moment into growing my business. I studied marketing strategies, refined my products, expanded my network. And slowly, things started changing. Sales picked up. Customers came back. The numbers grew. And then, one day, just 6 months after I had walked away from my so-called family, I checked my bank account and saw something I had never seen before. A 5-figure balance. For the first time in my life, I wasn't struggling. I wasn't just surviving. I was winning. By the end of that first year, my little side hustle had turned into a real company. I moved out of Rachel's place and into my own apartment. A beautiful, modern space with floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the city skyline. I bought myself the things I had always wanted but could never afford. And best of all, I did it on my own. No handouts, no shortcuts, no family. But even then, even after all of that, I still felt their words in the back of my mind. You never brought anything good to this family. I wanted to forget them. I wanted to erase them from my life. But something inside me wouldn't let go. Because deep down, I knew. One day, they would come back. And when they did, I would be ready. I was 2 years in when the first message arrived. A simple text from an unknown number. Dad. Alyssa, we need to talk. I stared at the screen, my stomach tightening. For 2 years, I had heard nothing from them. No birthday messages, no check-ins, not even a cold, passive-aggressive text from my mother. But now they needed something. I ignored it. A week later, another message. Mom, it's important. Please call us. Please. That word almost made me laugh. Now they wanted to be polite? Still, I didn't respond. But then a phone call, and another, and finally a voicemail. My mother's voice, shaky, almost unrecognizable. Alyssa, please, we're struggling. Your father lost his job. The house, it's in danger. We don't know what to do. I sat there listening, my heart hammering in my chest. They were losing everything. The same people who had looked me in the eyes and told me I was worthless. The same people who had thrown me away like I was nothing. And now, they were begging me for help. I took a slow breath, tapping my fingers against the table. I should have felt guilty. I should have felt something. But all I felt was satisfaction. They thought they could tear me down. They thought I would fail. But they had no idea who they had been up against. I reached for my phone, hovering over the call button. Not yet. Let them sweat. Let them feel what it's like to be powerless, because the next time I spoke to them, it would be on my terms. I let them wait. For 2 weeks, I ignored the messages, the missed calls, the voicemails piling up. Every day, I watched as my phone lit up with desperate attempts from the same people who once told me I wasn't worth their time. It was poetic, really. I had spent years craving their approval, bending over backward, trying to be enough, trying to fit into a mold they had created for me. And now they were the ones waiting on me. I had the power, and I was going to use it. Finally, after the 15th voicemail from my mother, this one on the verge of tears, I decided it was time. Time for them to hear my voice. Time for them to understand exactly who they had thrown away. I called back, and the moment my mother answered, she sucked in a sharp breath. "Alyssa." Her voice was small, weak. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the city skyline from my office window. My office. In a building I owned, built from my success. "Took you long enough?" I said. She hesitated. "We weren't sure you'd answer." I wasn't sure either. A heavy pause. Then she cleared her throat. "Alyssa, things have been difficult. Your father, he lost his job. I know." My voice was flat, emotionless, a sharp inhale. "Who told you?" I almost laughed. It's amazing what you can learn when people start crawling back into your life. She sighed, but there was no anger in her voice, just exhaustion. "Alyssa, we need your help." "Do you?" I mused. "Because 2 years ago you made it clear that I was nothing to this family. A burden, a waste of time. So why would you want my help now?" Silence. And then a broken whisper. "We were wrong." I felt those words, heavy in the air between us. Wrong. For the first time in my life, my mother was admitting it. But was it real? Or just desperation? She kept talking, her voice trembling as she laid it all out. Dad lost his job 6 months ago. The severance package ran out quickly. Bills started piling up. Stephanie got laid off. And Michael? Well, he never had to struggle a day in his life, so naturally he had nothing to offer. The family was crumbling. And I was their last hope. I should have felt bad. I should have felt something. But all I felt was the bitter taste of irony. Now I was valuable. Now I was worth something. I let her finish her story before I spoke. "And Dad? What does he have to say?" She hesitated. He wants to talk to you." I almost laughed. This was the same man who had looked me in the eye and told me I was worthless. The same man who had kicked me out of the house without a second thought. And now he wanted to talk? Interesting. I exhaled. "Put him on." There was a shuffling sound, muffled voices, and then, "Alyssa." My father's voice, stern but different. Not as sharp, not as condescending, weaker. I let the silence drag before responding. "Dad." Another pause. Then, "We need your help." There it was. No sugarcoating, no false pleasantries, just a direct plea from a man who once saw me as nothing. I gathered that. He sighed, the sound heavy with frustration. "I know you're angry." Angry? I let out a short laugh. I don't think angry is the right word. But sure, let's go with that. Another silence. Then he exhaled sharply, his voice lowering into something almost apologetic. "We made mistakes." Mistakes. As if what they did was some small error in judgment. As if throwing me away like garbage was just a bad decision they regretted later. I wasn't going to let them get away with that. "No, Dad. You didn't just make mistakes. You made a choice." The words hit hard. I could hear it in his breathing, the way it suddenly hitched like he wasn't expecting me to be so blunt. "You chose to push me out. You chose to cut me off. And now? You're only calling because you have no other option." More silence. Then, finally, "I was wrong." A confession. A rare moment of vulnerability from the man who had spent his entire life acting like he was superior to everyone else. And yet, even now I could hear it in his tone. This wasn't regret. It was survival. They didn't miss me. They weren't sorry for what they had done. They were just desperate. And that was what made this moment so perfect. I took a slow breath, letting the power settle into my bones. Then I smiled. I'll think about it. And then I hung up. I knew they would call again. I had barely hung up when my phone buzzed with another incoming call. My father, then my mother, then my sister. I let them all go to voicemail. Let them sweat. For 2 years, I had been nothing to them. And now they were desperate. That kind of power? It was intoxicating. But I wasn't just going to enjoy the moment. I was going to use it. Because this wasn't about money. This was about making them understand. I waited another 2 days before responding. When I finally picked up, my mother's breath hitched, like she hadn't expected me to call back. "Alyssa," she whispered, relief flooding her voice. "I've been thinking." She went silent, waiting. "I'll help you." The words dropped like a bomb. "You, what?" My mother's voice cracked. "I'll help you," I repeated, cool and measured, "but on my terms." She fumbled with her words. "Of course, yes, anything, Alyssa. We just need—" "I want a meeting," I cut in. "Face to face. You, Dad, Stephanie, and Michael. No excuses." A pause. Then, "Okay." I didn't meet them at their house. I made them come to me. A sleek, upscale restaurant downtown, one that required reservations weeks in advance. One they would never have been able to afford in their current situation. When I walked in, I saw them immediately. They were uncomfortable. My mother's hands were folded tightly on the table, her eyes darting around like she didn't belong. My father sat stiffly, his jaw tight, his pride barely holding together. Stephanie looked irritated, tapping her nails against the table. Michael was slouched in his chair, quiet for once. When I took my seat, I felt it. The shift. For the first time in my life, I wasn't the outsider. They were. I placed my phone on the table, letting the silence stretch before speaking. "Let's cut to the chase." My father's jaw ticked. "Alyssa, I held up a hand. "Number you, listen." His mouth snapped shut. Power. I could get used to this. "You need money." I stated it plainly. No pity, no sympathy, just facts. My father exhaled sharply, nodding. "We just need some help getting back on our feet," my mother said, her voice soft, careful. "A loan. We'll pay you back, of course." I smiled. "You must think I'm an idiot." My father flinched. My sister's mouth parted slightly. "You want my money?" I leaned forward, voice calm but firm. "Then I want something in return." My father frowned. "Alyssa, we're your family." "You stopped being my family when you threw me out." A sharp silence. Stephanie scoffed. "Are you seriously holding a grudge? It was years ago." I turned to her, leveling her with a cold stare. "If you lost everything tomorrow, would you expect me to help you?" She hesitated. "Well, yeah." "Why?" She blinked. "Because we're family." I smirked. "Exactly." I let the words settle before leaning back. "And yet, when I had nothing, you left me in the cold." Stephanie had nothing to say to that. "I'll give you the money," I said finally. My mother let out a shaky breath of relief. My father's shoulders sagged slightly. "But," I continued, "there are conditions." My father's face darkened. "Alyssa, we're not here to make a deal." "Then leave." I gestured toward the door. "Go find someone else to beg." Silence. He didn't move. Of course he didn't, because they had no one else. I folded my hands on the table. "Here's how this works. I don't do loans. If I give you money, I own something in return." My father tensed. "Own? Own what?" I shrugged. Your house. My mother gasped. Alyssa, no. You need money and I need investments. So here's the deal. I'll buy the house. At a fair market price. You can stay in it. For now. But you'll pay me rent. And if you ever default? I tilted my head. You leave. Shock. They didn't expect this. They thought I would just hand over money like some naive little girl still desperate for their love. Not anymore. My father's hands clenched into fists. This is ridiculous. I smiled. Then find another option. He said nothing, because there was no other option. My mother swallowed hard. We need time to think. I stood up, grabbing my bag. Take all the time you want, but the deal expires in 24 hours. My father's jaw tightened. My sister glared. My brother stayed quiet, eyes fixed on the table. I took one last look at them. The same people who once discarded me like trash. Now, they were at my mercy, and I was enjoying every second of it. I walked out without looking back. I knew they wouldn't take the deal easily. Pride is a funny thing. It keeps people from asking for help when they need it the most. And in my father's case, it made him want to die on a hill rather than admit that I had the upper hand. So, I wasn't surprised when 24 hours passed, and I didn't hear a word. Not a single call, not a single message, nothing. But I knew them, and I knew that silence wasn't surrender. It was resistance. A final attempt at holding on to the scraps of control they had left. What they didn't know? I had already planned for this. 2 days later, my mother finally called. Alyssa, we need to talk. I smirked. I figured you'd say that. She hesitated. Can we meet? No. A pause. What? We already met, I said smoothly. I gave you the deal. It's not my job to chase you for an answer. I heard the exhaustion in her sigh. Your father, she started, then stopped. What about him? I asked. He doesn't want to take the deal. I laughed. Of course he didn't. Then what does he expect? I said, amused. For me to just give him the money out of the kindness of my heart? Silence, which told me everything. I let out a sharp breath. Wow, he really doesn't get it, does he? Alyssa, please. No. My voice was firm, final. I don't owe him anything. If he doesn't want to take the deal, then he can figure out another way to pay his bills. She was quiet for a long moment. Then, softly, Alyssa, he's sick. I went still. Sick. The word hung between us, heavy and unexpected. What do you mean, sick? My mother sighed, the exhaustion deepening in her voice. He hasn't told anyone outside of the family, but he was diagnosed last year. Heart condition. It's getting worse. I blinked. For a moment, my mind raced, trying to process the information, trying to decide if it mattered. Because this was still the same man who had kicked me out. The same man who had told me I was worthless. The same man who was too proud to take my offer because it meant admitting that he needed me. Now, I was supposed to feel bad for him? I exhaled slowly. And why are you telling me this now? Because maybe... She hesitated, her voice breaking slightly. Maybe you'll understand why it's so hard for him to accept help from you. I closed my eyes. There it was. The same old excuse. The same old way my mother had always justified his behavior. He's just stressed. He just wants what's best for us. You know how he is. I clenched my jaw. So let me get this straight. He's willing to lose everything. His house, his stability, his dignity. Because his ego won't let him accept my help? She hesitated. It's not that simple. No, Mom, I said, my voice sharp. It is, and it's pathetic. Her breath hitched. I wasn't going to soften it for her. Not anymore. He has 24 hours, I said finally, to take the deal. After that, I'm not interested anymore. Alyssa, no. I cut her off. If his pride is more important than his family, then that's on him. I hung up, And this time, I didn't wait for a call back. The next day, I got the text. Not from my mother, not from my father. From Stephanie. Stephanie. Dad signed the papers. I let out a slow breath. South. That was it then. After fighting tooth and nail, after acting like he would rather die than admit he needed me, he finally gave in. I had won, and I should have felt triumphant. But instead, I felt nothing. Not joy, not satisfaction, just cold, empty victory. We met one last time, this time in my lawyer's office. The house was now legally mine. The deal was in writing. My father refused to look at me as he signed the final documents. His jaw was tight, his signature rough and angry on the paper. My mother looked exhausted, her shoulders sagging in defeat. And my siblings? They were quiet, because this was the moment they realized I wasn't the same Alyssa they had discarded. I had outgrown them. I had surpassed them. And now, I owned everything they had left. A week after the papers were signed, I got another text. From Michael. Michael, Dad isn't doing well. You should come by. I stared at the screen for a long time, because for the first time I realized I had everything I had ever wanted. The power, the success, the control, and yet I wasn't sure if I had won it all. I sat in my office staring at the text from Michael. Dad isn't doing well. You should come by. For the past 2 years, I had waited for this moment. The moment when my family would need me. When they would realize I was the one they should have valued all along. And now that it had happened, I didn't feel how I thought I would. I thought I would feel satisfaction, a twisted sense of justice, maybe even the final, ultimate victory. But instead, all I felt was tired. Because winning had come at a cost. I had spent years fighting for their approval, then years fighting to prove I didn't need it. I had built my life from nothing, carved out my success with my own 2 hands. And now, here I was, holding all the power, holding their future in my hands. And for the first time, I wasn't sure if I wanted it. I drove back to the house where I once lived. It looked different now, smaller, worn down. The yard was overgrown, the paint peeling at the edges. Or maybe it had always been this way, and I was just seeing it with different eyes. I knocked. The door opened slowly, and my mother stood there, eyes widening in surprise. "Alyssa," she whispered. I didn't say anything, just stepped inside. The living room looked the same. The couch, the old curtains, the photos on the walls. Except now, it wasn't theirs anymore. It was mine. And they all knew it. I walked past my mother without a word and into the hallway, toward my father's room. When I stepped inside, he was sitting on the edge of the bed, staring out the window. He looked smaller than I remembered. Older. Weaker. For a man who had once towered over me, whose words had cut me down like knives, he suddenly looked like nothing, just a tired, sick man. He turned his head slightly, noticing me. For a moment, he didn't say anything. Then, softly, "So, you finally came." I crossed my arms. "You didn't think I would?" A dry chuckle. "Didn't think you'd waste your time." I exhaled slowly, watching him. "That's funny. 2 years ago, you told me I was the one wasting time, that I had nothing to offer." His lips pressed together. He knew what I was doing. I wanted him to admit it, to say it out loud. But instead, he just sighed. "I suppose you're here to gloat." I tilted my head. Would it matter if I was? His expression darkened. And for a second, just a second, I saw the old version of him. The man who had disowned me, who had stood in this very house and told me I was nothing. But that man didn't exist anymore. Now, he was just a shell. And I realized then I didn't need to win, because I already had. And I was done fighting ghosts. I stepped forward, placing a piece of paper on the nightstand beside him. He glanced at it, frowning. "What's this?" "The deed to the house," I said simply. "I signed it over to Mom." His head snapped toward me, eyes widening. "What?" I shrugged. "You wanted it? It's yours. You'll just have to figure out the rest on your own." I turned, walking toward the door. "Wait." I paused. His voice was different now. Not angry, not arrogant, just broken. "Why?" he asked. I didn't turn around. "Because I don't need this anymore." "Alyssa." I turned slightly, my gaze meeting his. "You spent your whole life thinking power meant control, that it meant keeping people small so you could feel big." I took a slow breath. "But real power? Real power is knowing you don't have to prove anything anymore." His lips parted slightly, but no words came. I didn't wait for him to find them. I walked out of the room, out of the house, and out of their lives. For good. I drove home that night, rolling down the windows, letting the cool air rush against my skin. For years, I had thought revenge would fix things, that if I made them suffer, it would make up for all the pain they had caused me. But the truth? They were already suffering. Not because of me, but because of who they were. Because their pride had kept them small. Because their choices had made them miserable. And I had everything I had ever wanted. A life of my own. A future that didn't include them. And for the first time in years, I felt light. Free, because I wasn't my past. I wasn't their mistake. I wasn't their failure. I was my own victory. And that was enough.
At my sister's wedding, my stepmom blocked me, shouting, "Who let you in to run this wedding?" I calmly replied, "It's my sister's wedding. I don't need anyone's permission to be here." Enraged, she grabbed my hair and hit me by saying, "Get on your knees and apologize to her." Elle left, but a few hours later they called me in a panic. I'm 33 years old, doing well in my marketing career, and thought I had finally figured out how to manage all the drama in my family. But everything took a turn when my younger sister Janet started planning her wedding. I wanted nothing more than to help her create the perfect day, but I quickly realized it was going to be way more complicated than I had anticipated. The biggest shadow looming over the entire event was our dad, Jeremy. Ever since his divorce, he hasn't been the same. He's been struggling, slipping deeper into a cycle of drinking and making poor choices. And in my opinion, one of the worst choices he's made is his new girlfriend, Julie. From the moment I met her, I couldn't shake this uneasy feeling. Something about her just didn't sit right with me. One afternoon while Janet and I were at a flower shop picking out arrangements, she suddenly turned to me, her face clouded with worry. "Deborah, do you think Dad will actually show up sober?" she asked, her voice soft but tinged with desperation. I took a deep breath, trying to stay optimistic for her sake. "I really hope so," I said, forcing a smile. "For your sake, Janet, I truly do." But deep down I wasn't so sure. Hoping for the best didn't feel like enough, and the closer we got to the wedding day, the more I felt like I wasn't just your maid of honor. I was becoming a full-time peacekeeper. My boyfriend Aaron was a rock through it all. He always knew how to calm me down when I was spiraling. "Babe, you can't control everything." He'd remind me gently whenever I got too worked up. I know, I'd reply, though in my heart the worry wouldn't let me rest. I couldn't help thinking, if Dad ruins Janet's wedding, I'll never forgive him. But as stressful as everything already was, I had no idea things were about to get even worse. About a week before the wedding, I met up with my best friend Christina for coffee. Christina has always been my go-to for advice, the voice of reason I desperately needed. I spilled everything to her, hoping she could help me untangle the mess in my head. "What's really going on with you and Julie?" Christina asked, raising an eyebrow as she leaned closer. Her tone told me she already suspected something was up. I glanced around nervously, lowering my voice as if someone might overhear us. "There's just something off about her, Christina," I admitted. "The way she latched onto Dad so quickly, how she's always whispering things to him. And get this, one night I overheard Julie on the phone talking about some big score she was planning. Her tone was low and secretive, and my gut immediately twisted." Christina's eyes widened as I shared this with her. "You think she's scamming your dad?" she asked, her voice sharp with concern. "I don't know," I admitted, "but I'm going to find out." That conversation lit a fire in me. I couldn't ignore the nagging feeling that something wasn't right, and I needed answers. Late at night after work, I found myself scrolling through Julie's social media, trying to connect the dots. I even made quiet calls to a few of Dad's old friends, hoping they might shed some light on our sudden presence in his life. The deeper I dug, the more uneasy I felt. It was like piecing together a puzzle, but I wasn't sure I wanted to know what picture would emerge once it was complete. The day before the wedding, Janet and I were at the venue doing some final checks. The decorations were coming together beautifully, and for a moment, I let myself relax, but that calm shattered when Dad and Julie showed up unannounced. "Daddy!" Janet squealed, running to him with open arms. Her joy was palpable, but my heart sank the moment I saw him. His smile was sloppy, his words slurred. He was already drunk. Julie, on the other hand, looked composed, too composed. Her sharp eyes darted around the room like she was sizing everything up. "Andre, darling," she purred, wrapping her arm around him. "Let's go check out the bar." She glanced at me with a smug, knowing expression before leading him away. Anger boiled inside me, but I swallowed it for Janet's sake. I turned to her just as her happy expression faltered, tears welling up in her eyes. "Deborah," she started, her voice trembling. I pulled her into a tight hug before she could say anything else. "Don't worry, sis," I whispered firmly. "Tomorrow is about you and Patrick. Nothing is going to ruin it." But deep down I wasn't so sure. They say there's always a calm before the storm, and ours was brewing. Little did I know, it would hit with the force of a hurricane. The wedding ceremony itself was breathtaking. Janet looked absolutely radiant in her gown, her face glowing with happiness as she exchanged vows with Patrick. For a brief shining moment, it felt like all the chaos had melted away. Watching her up there, I let myself hope. Maybe, just maybe, we could get through this day without any major disasters. But that fragile hope didn't last. The moment we walked into the reception, my stomach dropped. There he was, Dad, standing by the bar, drink in hand, with Julie clinging to his arm like she was afraid to let go. His face was flushed and his laughter was far too loud. It was painfully obvious that he was drunk again. Aaron, who had been by my side all day, leaned in close, his voice soft. "You okay?" he asked, sensing my tension. I clenched my fist, trying to steady my breathing. "I've got to hold it together for Janet," I muttered, forcing a tight smile. But inside, I was raging. All I wanted was for Janet to have the perfect day she deserved. But as I watched Dad stumble over to a group of guests, sloshing his drink and laughing too loudly, I knew the storm was about to break, and it wasn't going to be pretty. I forced a smile, muttering reassurances, but deep down, I knew it was only a matter of time before things went completely off the rails. The tension in the room thickened as the evening wore on. Dad's laughter became louder, his movement sloppier, and Julie's eyes darted around the venue with a gleam that made my stomach twist. Something felt deeply wrong and I couldn't shake the unease. "Deborah," Janet whispered, tugging on my arm, her voice trembling. "Dad's making a scene." I turned to her, forcing a confident tone I didn't feel. "I'll handle it," I promised. Taking a deep breath, I walked toward where Dad was attempting a wobbly Macarena, laughing uproariously and nearly toppling over with each move. He looked like he didn't have a care in the world, or a shred of self-awareness. "Dad," I said, keeping my tone as calm as possible. "Let's step outside for some fresh air." "Nonsense," he slurred, waving me off dramatically. "I'm celebrating my baby girl's big day." He attempted a clumsy twirl and nearly crashed into a nearby table. Before I could steady him, Julie materialized at his side, gripping his arm tightly. "Leave him alone," she snapped, her tone sharp and defensive. "He's just having fun." "This isn't about fun," I replied evenly, though my voice was tight with frustration. "It's about respecting Janet on her special day." Julie's eyes narrowed, her lips curling into a sneer. "You think you're so perfect, don't you? Always acting like you're in charge, like you're better than everyone else." The words hit a nerve. I felt the heat rise in my chest, but I tried to keep my voice steady. "This isn't about me, it's about Janet. She deserves better than the circus." The argument escalated quickly, and in an effort to keep things from blowing up in the middle of the reception, I motioned for us to step into a quieter corner. But our voices rose with each exchange, the tension between us boiling over. "You don't know anything about our family," I spat, my patience fraying as I stared her down. Julie's face darkened. "I know one thing," she hissed. "Your daddy prefers my company over yours." The words hit like a slap. Something inside me snapped. "Oh, really?" I shot back, my voice trembling with anger. "Is that before or after you drained him of his money, Julie's?" Her face twisted with fury, and before I had time to process what was happening, she lunged at me. In one swift motion, she yanked off her heeled sandal and swung it at my head. Time seemed as slow as I felt the sharp impact of the heel connecting with my temple. Pain radiated through my skull, and everything around me erupted into chaos. Guests screamed and scattered, chairs overturned, and the room filled with panicked shouts and gasps. Through the haze of pain and confusion, I could only think of Janet. How had it come to this? I had promised to protect her happiness, yet here we were, her wedding day spiraling into a nightmare. I caught sight of Janet's horrified face in the crowd. Patrick held her back, his arms wrapped protectively around her as she sobbed, frozen in disbelief. My heart shattered at the sight, knowing this was supposed to be her perfect day and it was anything but. Security rushed in, grabbing Julie and pulling her away as she thrashed and screamed obscenities at anyone within earshot. Her wild shrieks echoed through the venue, adding to the chaos. I stood there, dazed, clutching the side of my head, feeling the sting of tears and the throbbing pain from the blow. Around me, the once joyous reception was now a blur of scattered guests, toppled decorations, and shocked whispers. It was supposed to be a day of celebration, a memory Janet would cherish forever. Instead, it had turned into a nightmare none of us would forget. I stood frozen in place as the police arrived, their flashing lights casting an eerie glow over what was supposed to have been a magical evening. Julie was led away in handcuffs, her defiant screams echoing in the night. In that brief moment, I caught a glimpse of Dad. He looked completely lost, his face etched with confusion and pain. For the first time I realized things would never be the same. The days after the wedding were a blur. Between filing police reports, giving interviews, and enduring countless sleepless nights, I felt like I was living in a nightmare that wouldn't end. Every sound made me jump, and the image of Julie lunging at me with her sandal replayed in my mind over and over like a cruel, unrelenting loop. Aaron, my rock through everything, held me close whenever the nightmares hit. "You're safe now, Deborah," he'd whisper, his voice calm and soothing. But no matter how many times he said it, feeling safe seemed impossible. How could I when my own father's girlfriend had attacked me at my sister's wedding? How do you even begin to heal from something like that? Janet, understandably, was a wreck. When I visited her about a week later, she looked like a shell of herself. Her once bright eyes were dull, and she couldn't even meet my gaze. "All those months of planning," she said, her voice heavy with sorrow. "And for what? My wedding will always be remembered as the day someone tried to hurt my sister." "Janet, I'm so sorry," I began, the guilt weighing heavily on me. I had promised to protect her happiness, and I had failed. She shook her head, cutting me off. "I know it's not your fault, Deborah, but still I can't help feeling like our family is cursed or something." While Janet was drowning in her own pain, Dad was living in complete denial. He called me constantly, leaving voicemails that made my blood boil. "Deborah, sweetie, let's not blow this out of proportion," one message began. Julie was just upset. She didn't mean any harm. Hearing him defend her like that after everything she had done made my stomach churn with anger. How could he excuse her actions? How could he still be on her side? The final straw came a few days later when Dad showed up in my apartment, reeking of alcohol. I opened the door to find him swaying slightly, his eyes glassy and unfocused. "Dad, you need to leave," I said, my voice as steady as I could manage. "But Pumpkin, we're family," he slurred, his tone pitiful. "We need to stick together." Something hardened inside me as I looked at him, this broken, unrecognizable version of the man who had once been my father. "No, Dad," I said firmly, "we're done. I can't do this anymore." The hurt in his eyes almost made me waver, almost. But as I closed the door in his face, I knew I had made the right decision. Some wounds couldn't heal if I kept reopening them. Meanwhile, Christina, my ever-determined best friend, had taken it upon herself to dig into Julie's past. One evening she called me over to her apartment, her voice tinged with urgency. When I arrived, she spread a pile of papers across her coffee table. "Deborah, look at this," she said, her tone grim. "Julie's got a record. Assault, fraud, theft, you name it." I stared at the papers in disbelief, my mind reeling. There it was in black and white, proof of everything I had suspected but never had the courage to voice. Julie wasn't just toxic, she was dangerous. I scanned the documents, each page twisting my stomach tighter with a sickening realization. How could Dad not know about this? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Christina hesitated, her lips pressed tightly together. Then, she sighed. "That's the thing, Deborah," she said, her tone heavy. "I think he did know." The truth hit me like a ton of bricks. I stared at her, willing her to say she was wrong, but she wasn't. The evidence was right in front of me. Joint bank accounts, suspicious money transfers, and other financial red flags. It wasn't just that Dad had been manipulated by Julie. He had participated. He wasn't just a victim. He was an accomplice. Telling Janet what we had discovered was one of the hardest things I've ever had to do. We sat together in her small, cozy kitchen, the unopened wedding gifts stacked in the corner, like relics of a dream turned sour. "I can't believe it," Janet whispered, tears streaming down her face. "How could he do this to us? How could he let her?" She trailed off, shaking her head. "I don't even know him anymore." I reached for her hand, my heart aching for her. "I don't know who Dad is either," I admitted softly. "But right now we need to protect ourselves. We can't let this pull us down." Janet looked up at me, her tear-streaked face hardening with resolve. "I'm with you, Deborah, always." Her determination gave me strength, but it didn't erase the guilt that clung to me. By exposing Dad's crimes, I had effectively destroyed whatever was left of his life. Yet deep down I knew I wasn't the one who had ruined him. He had done that all on his own. The mix of anger, confusion, and guilt became too much to handle on my own, so I decided to get help. That's how I found myself sitting in a therapist's office for the first time, trying to make sense of the mess my life had become. "It's normal to feel conflicted," my therapist Dr. Frank reassured me during one of our sessions. Her voice was calm and steady, like an anchor in the storm of my emotions. "You've been through something traumatic. You're grieving the loss of the father you thought you knew." I stared at my hands, feeling the sting of tears I wasn't ready to shed. "But shouldn't I hate him after everything he's done?" "There's no should when it comes to emotions," she said gently. "What's important is that you acknowledge how you feel and give yourself the space to work through it." Working through it sounded simple when she said it, but it wasn't. The pain, anger, and betrayal didn't disappear overnight, but as I left her office that day, I felt a tiny flicker of hope. It wasn't much, but it was a start. Maybe, just maybe, I could rebuild something good from the ruins of my family's past. 5 months after the wedding disaster, I found myself in a place I never thought I'd be happy. Despite everything that had happened, I realized I was surrounded by love and support. Janet, Aaron, Christina and I had become an unbreakable team. Our shared pain had forged a bond stronger than ever before. One night, the 4 of us were gathered around my dining table, sharing dinner and laughter. The apartment was filled with warmth, the kind of joy I had once feared I'd lost forever. Janet raised her glass, a small but genuine smile lighting up her face. "To new beginnings," she said, her voice steady with hope, "and to family, the one we choose." We clinked glasses, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I didn't feel broken. I felt whole. In that moment, I knew that no matter what the future held, I had the strength to face it, and I had my chosen family by my side. I raised my glass, clinking it with my sisters, a smile tugging at my lips. The toast felt like a symbolic closing of one chapter and the start of another. But as Janet and I shared a moment of calm, the storm surrounding Julie's trial raged on, drawing the attention of every media outlet in town. The courtroom had become a circus, and sitting there day after day my stomach churned as more of Julie's dark history came to light. Dad sat beside me, his face pale and frozen in disbelief, as her past crimes were laid bare, fraud, theft and manipulation stretching back years. Each new revelation was like another dagger to our already wounded family, but the most shocking moment hadn't even arrived yet. Behind the scenes, Christina and I had been working tirelessly to uncover the full extent of Dad's involvement in Julie's schemes. We pored over bank records, emails, and financial transactions, piecing together a picture that was far worse than I'd feared. When our lawyer stood up during the trial, I felt my breath catch in my throat. "Your Honor," he began, his voice clear and steady, "we have documentation proving Jeremy Messing's involvement in Miss Lang's fraudulent activities." The courtroom fell silent, and I heard Dad inhale sharply beside me. I couldn't bring myself to look at him. The truth was finally out. He wasn't just a victim of Julie's manipulation. He had played an active role in her schemes. As the legal drama unfolded, my personal life took a surprising and uplifting turn. One sunny Thursday afternoon, my boss called me into his office. I walked in nervously, unsure of what to expect, but his warm smile immediately set me at ease. "Deborah," he said, leaning forward, "we've been incredibly impressed with your work. Your resilience and creativity over the past year have been outstanding. I'm happy to let you know we're promoting you to Senior Marketing Director." I stared at him in disbelief. "Thank you. I don't even know what to say." "You've earned it," he said simply, shaking my hand. The moment I left his office, I pulled out my phone to call Aaron. "You won't believe this," I said, my voice trembling with excitement. "I got promoted." Aaron's joyful laugh echoed through the line. "That's amazing, babe. I'm so proud of you. We need to celebrate tonight." Even amidst all the chaos, there were glimmers of hope and joy. Janet and Patrick, determined to move forward, made a beautiful decision. They decided to renew their vows. This time it wasn't an elaborate event. It was a small, intimate ceremony in their backyard with only close friends and family. "Second time's the charm," Patrick joked, his warm smile making Janet laugh as they exchanged rings again. Watching them, I felt a deep sense of peace. The wounds from the past weren't gone, but they were healing slowly but surely. Finally, the day of Julie's sentencing arrived. The courtroom was thick with tension as the judge prepared to deliver the verdict. Sitting there, I reflected on how much had changed since that disastrous wedding day. We had been through so much pain and betrayal, but somehow we had survived. We had grown stronger. We were moving forward. When the judge called for victim impact statements, I stood up, my hands trembling slightly but my voice firm. "The scars from that night run deep," I began, my gaze steady, "but they've made me stronger. What happened shattered parts of my family and left wounds I never thought would heal. Yet through that pain, I found resilience, I found strength, and I found the family I choose to stand beside me." As I spoke, I could feel the weight lifting from my chest. This was my moment to reclaim control, to stand up not just for myself but for Janet, for my family, and for the life we were rebuilding. When I finished, the room was silent for a beat before the judge nodded solemnly. Julie received her sentence, and with it came a sense of closure. Walking out of the courthouse that day, I felt the sunlight on my face and realized something I hadn't felt in a long time: peace. The storm had passed. We weren't the same as we had been before, but we were stronger. We had found our way back to each other, and together we were finally ready to embrace the future. I locked eyes with Julie, feeling a surge of strength. This was my moment to reclaim my life, to draw a line between the person I had been and the survivor I had become. "I'm here today," I said, my voice steady, not as a victim, but as a survivor. As Julie was led away in handcuffs, I felt an unexpected sense of closure. It was as if the weight of that long, painful chapter was finally being lifted. For the first time in what felt like forever, I could breathe freely. But the real celebration came a month later. Janet, Patrick, Aaron, Christina and I gathered at my favorite restaurant to celebrate my promotion and everything we had overcome together. The evening was warm and full of light, the kind of night that reminds you life can be good again. "To Deborah," Christina said, raising her glass, her smile wide and proud, "the strongest person I know." I couldn't let her finish without chiming in. "To all of us," I added, lifting my glass and glancing around the table. These were the people who had stood by me through the hardest year of my life, the ones who never let me fall when everything felt like it was crumbling. For proving that family isn't just about blood, but about loyalty and love. We clinked glasses and the sound of laughter filled the air. As we shared stories, teasing each other and reminiscing about the highs and lows, I felt something shift inside me. I realized how much had changed, not just in my life but in me. The past year had been like a nightmare filled with pain, betrayal and loss, but in a strange way, it had also been a gift. It had shown me who really mattered, taught me how strong I could be, and gave me the courage to cut out the toxicity that had been holding me back. Sitting there, surrounded by people who genuinely cared for me, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time: peace. This wasn't the perfect happy ending I had dreamed of as a little girl. It came with scars and memories I wished I could erase, but it was real, and that made it beautiful. For the second time in years I felt hopeful about the future. I was grateful for the family I had found, the love that surrounded me, and the strength I had discovered within myself. And so that's where my story ends, or at least this chapter of it. But now I'm curious. If you were in my shoes, would you have given your father another chance after everything he did? Or would you have kept those boundaries in place like I did? It's a tough decision, and I know many of you have faced similar struggles with toxic family members. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Share your experiences in the comments. How have you handled difficult family dynamics in your own lives? If my story resonated with you, please hit that like button and consider subscribing for more real-life stories and honest conversations about navigating complicated relationships. Together, we can find strength in sharing, and maybe even help someone else find their way through the storm.